So I'd like to begin by echoing Susan's comments this morning about how wonderful it is to have these two sanghas come together to practice full 2-day session. So I'm really enjoying it a great deal, and am happy to have the opportunity to give a talk this afternoon and tomorrow morning, and then Susan will wrap things up tomorrow afternoon. So what I thought my talk this afternoon is going to have a few different segments to it. And I thought maybe a good place to begin would be with a variation on the Buddha's enlightenment story, but the variation comes after his enlightenment. And according to this story, the Buddha really had no desire to go out and attempt to teach others. It's like, how do you teach this? I mean, it's in keeping with the Zen tradition's teaching about beyond words. So, having had his great realization, he was in a quandary. What do you expect me to do? I got it, but how do I convey this to other people? It's an impossible task. And as the story goes, some beings from heavenly realms, devas of some sort, did some arm twisting and cajoling, and finally they were able to convince him to give it a try. And the rest is in the written record, so we know how that turned out. And a lot of teachers through the ages, including this one, had similar reservations. But, it wasn't a deva that twisted my arm, it was a teacher. Said, I'd like you to give a talk. And based on that student-teacher relationship, you learn you really don't want to say no. Be open. This is Zen practice. Say, yeah, I'd love to do that. Even though it's the last thing in the world I would want to do. And here I am all these years later, still doing it. And of course, the tradition didn't end with Shakyamuni Buddha. He's left a very long lineages, myriad lineages. Some have died out, some are still very much alive today. So it's the gift of the Buddha's enlightenment that Susan shared the account of this morning. That gift keeps on giving, so to speak. In centers across this globe, at a time when the message that the Dharma is conveying is so sorely needed. So it helps inspire reluctant teachers like me to really give it an effort because the need is so great. And feeling that when I look at other things I might be engaged in, I think I'll try and find the time and develop the skill set to be able to do this so important work. So that was where I wanted to begin. But I'd like to segue from that, given the fact that this coming together today and tomorrow represent the two surviving traditions of Zen. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about those traditions in our dualistic way of viewing things. We like to make distinctions and take them pretty seriously. So one big distinction is that the Rinzai folks work with koans. Of course, that's very true. But surprise, surprise, so too do the Soto Zen folks. In fact, we have a long tradition of just that. Literally going back to the figure who is kind of recognized by our tradition as the starting point of what's become Soto Zen, a contemporary of Lin Chi, who was the origin point for the Rinzai tradition. Dong Shan actually developed a teaching called the Five Ranks, which in Hakuin system was the penultimate koan. The final one is the precepts, which Susan's going to be talking about tomorrow. But the penultimate in Hakuin system was a Dongshan teaching. But it goes further than that. A teacher that we've been looking at for the past couple of Saturday mornings, Hongzhi, who's from 12th century China, he collected an important collection of koans known as the Book of Serenity, or sometimes also the Book of Equanimity. That's a Soto Zen text. And Dogen himself, our founder in Japan, assembled what John Daido Loori published a number of years back as the 300 koan Shobogenzo of Dogen, a collection of 300 koans that he brought back from China. So our usage of koans isn't as systematic as the one that came to be used within Rinzai, but it's a very important way of conveying teachings. And in that vein, I thought a good figure to turn to kind of give, I'm going to ultimately talk about one particular koan from the Blue Cliff record that Joshu figures in. But I also want to share with you a few of the selections from the volume of his recorded sayings, from which a number of koans were drawn. In fact, Joshu is a major figure in koans. They're the two major collections for the Rinzai tradition are the Mumonkan and the Blue Cliff record. The Mumonkan consists of 48 koans, and Joshu appears in 5 of them. Blue Cliff is 100 koans, and Joshu appears in 12 of them. And he's also the star of arguably the most important koan, the one that so many people begin with, the koan commonly called Mu. The monk is asking Joshu, does a dog have Buddha nature? To which the reply was Mu, which translates as no, or more accurately, no thing. And actually, the koan I'm going to get to of Joshu's has that aspect It's kind of like a monk who's trying to stir the pot up with Joshu a bit. Because asking, does a dog have Buddha nature? Well, of course, that's the standard Orthodox teaching. So you're just trying to see where Joshu will go with that. And I've heard it described, his response was almost as revolutionary as if a Catholic priest asked the Pope, is there a God? To which the Pope would reply, moo. And you go, whoa. Heresy. Excommunication. But of course, Joshu's deep, profound teaching contained in that one word that students of that koan just immerse themselves in. Their life becomes mu, the practice of mu. So Joshu became described as practicing lip Zen because he was so skillful at using language, at words. He's kind of a counterpoint to Dogen. Dogen is also very skillful, but he would write these long tracts. Joshu, in just one word or one phrase, could really enlighten people. You know, of course, this is what so many of the koan dialogues are about, is bringing the monk, the student, to some level of realization. But Joshu had this beautiful gift, using words, whereas other teachers would use, as Dogen describes it, the fist, the staff, the shout, or gutai, the one finger. But Joshu could use language in such a skillful way. And I just wanted to share with you 3 of the pieces from his recorded sayings. And actually, one of them, Crooked River has looked at recently. But it's dealing with a topic that occurs in a number of koans, and it's really an essential category of koan in a student's development. While the master was on pilgrimage, he came to the temple of a priest. He had just entered the gate when they met each other, and the master said, "Is there anything here? Is there anything here?" The priest held up his fist. Sounds like a great Zen exchange, right? But the master said, and the master here, of course, is Joshu. The master said, "It's difficult to drop anchor in shallow waters." So he was rejecting that response. Later, he arrived in another temple, saw the priest, and said, "Is there anything here? Is there anything here?" The priest held up his fist. Same response. The master said, "You are able to give or take away. You are able to be casual or strict." He encompasses the boundlessness. So one gets shot down and the other one gets praised. What the heck is going on here? But students, monks, priests in this case, kind of get tethered to getting approval and avoiding disapproval. And that's kind of a test of realization. If there is realization, then it's unwavering. It's like somebody trying to argue to you that 2 + 2 = 5. it's not going to get much of a reaction from you, right? If you reject that and they go, "Oh, you don't know anything," are you going to get upset? Yeah, the same sort of approach in terms of somebody who has had realization. And then the notion of getting puffed up if you receive praise. Because teachers, for good reason, can be kind of stingy with praise. And there's a reason for that, because that can do harm. So it's a common thread through commentaries on this, that if the priest receiving approval kind of starts gloating a bit, big problem, big problem. Also, the priest that got shot down, if he's just shaken by it, problem. He's just imitating probably somebody else who used that response of raising the fist. It's all too easy to copy somebody else's response, whether it's a verbal response or a performative art response like that. Just copy what somebody else did. But teachers, this is how they prod to see what's really going on there. What are you about, Mr. Priest? And again, just a short, simple response. So skillful. The next one I wanted to share from this. There was a Korean priest who asked the master to come to lunch. The master arrived at the front gate and asked, "What temple is this?" The priest said, "A Korean temple." The master said, "You and I are an ocean apart." This was appropriate for this gathering because we could say the same thing about Soto Rinzai. We create that difference. Do we want to look at the commonality, or do we want to focus on the difference? And let's be honest, usually we want to focus on the difference. That's kind of what we're all about, is making distinctions. So very probing. Joshu has this quality to him. And then finally, where he does actually hit somebody, but it's the line that follows the hitting that's the zinger. The master was leaving the main hall when he saw a monk bowing to him, showing deep respect. The master struck him with his stick. The monk said, "But bowing is a good thing." The master said, "A good thing is not as good as no thing." As moo. That's why he got hit. So now I'd like to turn my attention to case number 52 from the Blue Cliff Record, which is titled "The Bridge of Joshu," or using the Chinese name, Jiaozhou. And it's a pretty short main case, which is the only piece to this koan I want to look at. A monk asked Jiaozhou, "For a long time, I've heard about Jiaozhou's bridge of stone, but now that I'm here, I see just a rickety plank." Jiaozhou said, "You see just the plank, You don't see the bridge. The monk said, what's the bridge? Zhao said, it lets asses cross, it lets horses cross. So his ability to kind of draw this monk in, who's trying to, as it's sometimes described, pull his whiskers. Who's trying to get a reaction out of him. And a little bit of a story about Joshu is warranted here because he was a late bloomer and lived to be 120. And I think he was 80 before he became abbot of his temple, Jiao name. He took the name of the temple. Prior to that, he had practiced under Nansen, who was a Dharma heir of Matsu, who was one of arguably the most important Zen teacher, any tradition, any time. His impact was huge. But Joshu, even though he received transmission, he was like the Dharma grandson of Matsu. He himself didn't have very many Dharma heirs. And the lineage that passed through him died out within a couple of generations. So his temple was very small. So I can also relate to him in that fashion. He wasn't trying, like many of the other great teachers, to establish a big temple. He had a few monks, and he was very happy just to devote himself to the practice. And in fact, for the 20 years, I guess it was, from age 60 to age 80, he traveled the land. As he put it, if he finds a 9-year-old child who can teach him something, he will stay with him and learn from that person. And on the other hand, if he meets a 100-year-old person who's got it all wrong, he will stay and teach that individual. So he was out there interacting with people to really further develop his realization, his understanding at the age of 60. And then at 80, he finally begins to take charge of a small temple and lives for another 40 years. And so this koan I just read to you takes place late in his life when he is an old man. And students, even though he has a small temple, doesn't have very many Dharma heirs, word about this guy is getting out there, and people are coming to visit and converse with him. And sometimes they are people like this young monk, and the case doesn't describe him as young, but I just picture him that way. He's kind of a rabble rouser. So, and the other point to make here in terms of background, the monk asked him, for a long time I've heard about Zhao's bridge of stone. And there was a bridge of stone in that province of Zhao. And it was pretty old. It had been built towards the end of the Han Dynasty, which would put it somewhere in the neighborhood of 100, 200 Common Era. So quite a few centuries before Zhao. So this is the bridge that the monk is talking about. For a long time, I've heard about Zhao's Bridge of Stone because it was well known as a famous landmark. But now that I'm here, I see just a rickety plank, playing the name of the bridge against Zhao's name. And rather than a stone bridge, he just sees this very rickety old man. So he really is pulling his whiskers. How will he respond? He has to teach this person. It's kind of a continuation of his 20 years between the ages of 60 and 80. You come in and start playing games with him, well, he's going to try to teach you something. He's that compassionate, that devoted to transmitting the Dharma. And that's why he said, you see just the plank. You don't see the bridge. Which prompts the monk to ask about the bridge then. The monk then says, what is the bridge? What is it then? Now Joshu's got him where he wants him. You asked the magic question here. So Jiao said, it lets asses cross, it lets horses cross. I mean, profound Zen teaching here in terms of non-duality. There's no distinction between asses, horses. It calls to mind, for people familiar with Zen mind, beginner's mind, Suzuki had, the fast horse and the horse that you had to beat half to death to get moving. And everybody wants to be the fast horse, just like everybody wants to be the horse, not the ass here. But what's being said by Joshu is everybody can cross the bridge. It's open to everyone. Asses, horses, fast horses, horses that just don't get it. It's very slow horses. And Suzuki, of course, in Zen mind, beginner's mind, took great pride in the fact that he was a terrible horse. Whereas everybody else was wanting to be a fast horse, getting caught up in those distinctions. So to truly have an awakening experience requires that we overcome those dualistic ways of viewing things, to be able to see the bridge. And the bridge is every step we take. Those Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. They're bridges that we're always crossing. So if we can understand that these ever-present Dharma gates are open to everyone, and we tend to think, well, they're closed to me. I can't penetrate that. And there are koans about that. The inability to penetrate it. But to see this stone bridge. And that's what Jiao is expressing to this young monk, kind of inviting him, come on across. Come on across. That's the stone bridge that the monk is now asked about. It's the way, the path. And it's here right now, in this very moment. Just take that step. Go to the other side. That's the beautiful thing about bridge, is it kind of builds on this Zen analogy of going across the river to the other shore. So instead of needing a boat, the raft to get you to the other side, now you've got a bridge. So as a metaphor, I kind of like that one better, because it might be tough to get the asses and the horses on the raft and get them across. But to cross the bridge, piece of cake. Just run them right over. So it's open to everybody. Its universal nature is kind of apparent. But that's what it's it's portraying is the same thing as the raft taking you to the other shore. The stone bridge of Jiaozhou. And another important point made here is where Jiaozhou, his first rejoinder, is you just see the plank, you don't see the bridge. Because that's such an accurate depiction of our limited view, which we talk about as limited view, that's as finite beings, that's our nature. We see things in a limited way. But the reality we come to understand transcends that simplistic limited view. And there are some well-known visual, we'll call them illusions, that kind of do the same thing. Has anybody ever seen the duck rabbit? Depending on how you look at it, you either see a duck or a rabbit. And if you glom onto one particular way of seeing it, then that's what you're going to see. So to have this awakened view means you can actually see more than one view. Of course, the other well-known one is Rubens' vase, which is a vase or two people facing each other. Which do you see? And to be able to just flow back and forth. So Zen practice bears some similarity to working with these types of illusions, to be able to see multiple things in there and avoid falling into that trap that we so often fall into of just seeing it one particular way, the way it strikes us at first. And of course, in our time, where our view is getting manipulated for ulterior motives, they can kind of pull us into seeing it a particular way. Even though the truth is, it's far more complex than that. There's way more to see. But we are driven to simplify. That serves a purpose, but we end up kind of buying into it to such a degree that that becomes reality for us. And that's the problem. We can no longer see that what became just kind of a shortcut algorithm became reality in our mind. And that's all we see. And we will get pretty upset if you try to tell me it's something else too. Because we like our limited views. We become attached to them. Very attached. And that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. So, Zen awakening, Shakyamunis, down to the awakenings that are happening across the globe at every moment, involve seeing things in their vastness, being able to go beyond our limited view. that serves limited views, I think a good way to look at it is that they serve limited purposes. It's kind of what they're designed for. That's why they're limited. If you have a limited purpose, you need a limited view. But we stick to the limited view, even though our purpose now has become more expansive. We can't move past the limited views. And therein lies a real big problem. So let me stop there so that we can open this up a bit. And if need be, I can certainly fill in a little bit more as well. But I always like to hear your thoughts and questions about it. So the floor is open. Okay. Well, let's go through this with a few more points drawn from some of the commentary. And to come back again to this notion of limited view, the Jiao seems to be saying that it is a matter of view. Our perspective creates our reality. So to take this backward step and turn the light within, to see how are we experiencing the world. By turning the light within, we can begin to look more closely into this matter. So the connection with the practice of Zazen enters into this. That we can begin to understand how our perspective creates our reality. And as I was saying, that is the problem. We take a perspective, which is a limited view. It's one perspective out of myriad perspectives. And of course, the old adage that there's a great deal of truth to is that everybody has their own perspective. So you can see where conflict, dukkha, is baked right into that. So in terms of the Buddha's awakening and his first teaching being the Four Noble Truths and the truth of dukkha, of suffering, this is how limited view plays such a critical role. Limited view puts us in conflict with others automatically, just because it's perspectival. Everybody seeing based on their different angle, their different experience they bring to it. So without some sort of, I'll call it awakening to the true reality as being something well beyond our limited views, then we're kind of consigned to a world of dukkha. And that, of course, is exactly what the Buddha saw as his mission, was to alleviate dukkha. So it should be apparent how treating this affliction of attachment to a perspective plays such a vital part in that. And another point that gets made in the commentary, which is really important, is this aspect of low expectations. And I think it was Joe this morning talking about kind of our seeking. This low expectations is kind of pulling back from that. If we have high expectations, now we're kind of got to get it, got to get it, got to get it. And as Joshu's Dharma grandfather, Matsu, famously put it, and one of his great Dharma lines was, ordinary mind is the way. And a corollary to that was that if you try to move towards it, you're actually moving away from it. Ordinary mind means ordinary mind, just as it is. There's nothing to move towards. What's occurring right now? As soon as you try to move towards it, you've lost it. I relate that phenomenon to connected to my talks about Zen and jazz. In jazz, being an original is so important. Creativity. But yet, if you try to be original, you're moving away from it. You're trying to be something. Whereas to be truly original, you're just in this moment, being this moment. And that's what your field of creativity is right here, right now. As soon as you're moving towards it, it's a fabricated thing it's an objectified thing that you're moving towards. I want to do that. I want to do that. Whereas the Zen practice is about openness, which entails acceptance. Open acceptance. And I don't mean that in a passive way. It's accepting what's happening right now so that you can respond in an appropriate way. So if injustice is happening, you'd want to really open yourself to what's going on so that you could respond in a helpful way, as opposed to just taking one single perspective. And you may really greatly reduce your ability to respond effectively because of that. You don't see the broader picture. You ignore the broader picture because our judgmental mind wants to immediately leap right in, evaluate, condemn or praise, depending on what's being conveyed. And again, the algorithms at work are feeding that very type of response from us. Love it or hate it. And hate gets your attention. Anger. Guaranteed to induce you to click on it. And that's all they want. That's it. Look at me. So low expectations, to come back to where I started this line of thought, low expectations prepare us to be surprised by the ambush of self-enlightenment. It can only happen when you're not looking out for it. Again, coming back to Joe's question this morning. And there's so many stories about this. I remember Bankei I think he was 16th century. He tried so hard. It was kind of like a duplication of the Buddha's effort, who nearly died from his effort. Bankei was very similar. He just practiced so hard, and he was on the verge of death. And finally, it's like he hit that wall, and he just gave up, surrendered. And that's when he got it. When he stopped chasing, he had just literally surrendered. He said, okay, I can't get there. He gave up, you might say. And that's when the opening occurred, and he got it. Low expectations. But he started off with really high expectations. He was on a mission, like so many practitioners are. And it's not that there's no effort. Of course there's effort. But not chasing a particular thing. Just put effort into enjoying your life in all its richness. That's worth a lot of effort, I think. When people feel it's worth a lot of effort to earn lots of money so you can enjoy your life, right? So why not, if it turns out that you could enjoy your life without going through all that? Just put your effort into being fully present and seeing each thing that opens itself to you, kind of as a miracle, as an instantiation of the sacred, the divine, to use theological terminology. So I wanted to make sure with Joe's question this morning that we talked about these low expectations. But that's really an important stage, you might say, on the path, to be able to just settle in to this present moment. Because you can see how our heightened expectations are pulling us off the present moment. We're aiming for something. And we tend to devalue what's actually happening. Because in order to have high expectations, that means you've already framed something that you're expecting. You know, I want to be enlightened. Well, what would that look like? How will you know? Well, I don't know, but I'll know it, I'm sure. I'll get it. I'm not worried about that. There's nothing to worry about. That's the Zen path, is just be present. So I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to get across. And we still have about 10 more minutes. We could lengthen some zazen. I'm always a big advocate for that. Joe?
In thinking about the place of right view in the Eightfold Path, and then thinking about my limited perspective, and then trying to use the Eightfold Path,
Yeah.
and not making progress, I should say, just being aware of the Eightfold Path with when I take action
Yeah.
and doing things.
Yeah.
again, I'm thinking I have a limited perspective. How would I recognize that right view and put it in good perspective for myself?
Yeah.
Or is that something that's just you keep bumping on it until you go into the next world?
Well, I mean, actually, I think the way I would respond to that is to see the emptiness of all views. That's important. And by seeing the emptiness, that's moving us beyond limited view, because each view you see as being the creation of everything else, literally. Since we're studying the Huayan, you know how that plays out. So now you look at view in a much vaster scope. Now you still have your limited view because we're finite beings. So that's what we're equipped to arrive at, is our limited views. But now we can come together with others, and maybe we can actually compare limited views. And rather than seeing it as a threat, see the comparison as something kind of beautiful. That's where interfaith work kind of fits into that mold. They have their views, their rituals, their practices, and to enter into that realm with openness, you can actually begin to see the beauty being manifested by other traditions. And we know what it looks like when we can't, when we are caught in our limited view. It's a whole different scene then. So I think that's kind of a good realm with which to see the difference between the emptiness of views, which doesn't mean they're insignificant or without any meaning. Of course, they're filled with meaning. They have long traditions that are dependent upon all these factors of the history of societies. So to really take a deep dive in most anything is to really, you've got your work cut out for you. You've got to study a lot because there's so much involved in it. And I find that exhilarating rather than the simplistic view that we kind of lapse into. That's boring and dull and creates all that conflict. So, what does it have going for it other than the fact it's a nice shortcut? We don't have to put a lot of effort into it. Mike, out in Google land. I was going to say Zoom land, but we've transcended that.
Yeah, it's still Zoom to the OGs there. Um, the world of I forget what the rule is called, where you do 1,000 hours of something, whatever skill it is, and then you've become a master of it. I just am always fascinated where Zen goes completely the other direction after 1,000 hours of zazen. You might know less than when you actually start.
Right. Yeah.
But koans, I think, are just a wonderful way to help you see that and kind of keep peeling away layers until you get to nothing or something or everything.
Yeah. I mean, it's to see where your obstructions are. So it's kind of like a medical diagnostic. You work out a koan and you'll find out where you're getting caught up, where the dharma can't flow because it's being obstructed. They're just these wonderful, such creative devices. It's kind of a wonder how those originated. I mean, it's just so rich. Susan.
Just to follow up on that person, I can't remember who came up with the 10,000 hours. I can't remember the guy's name, but he has recently put out a book about all the things he got wrong, and that's one of them. I think that it's a perfect example of how a particular view, if you adopt it in a rigid way,
Yeah.
is an obstacle.
Right.
So there are people who sit for 5 minutes and come to awakening, and then there are people who sit for decades.
Yeah.
And maybe they come, but who knows?
Yeah.
But it may or may not be 10,000 hours.
Right. Exactly.
I wish I remembered his name. Malcolm Gladwell.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Anders Ericsson was the original.
What?
Anders Ericsson was the original paper.
Paper?
Oh, okay.
Malcolm Gladwell was cited. Took one sentence out of that.
Hmm. Interesting. Huh. Yeah. And then there's the Charlie Parker approach. If I can jump back to jazz again, that his advice to students is you should study the music, your instrument, learn everything you can, but then forget it all. Let it go. But you need to actually take that on. You need that structure, but don't let it bind you. It can actually become a force for liberation. And Sesshin is a great example of that. You know, we kind of follow pretty rigid schedules. You know, we try to organize your day for you so you never have to think about what you're going to do. You look at the schedule and you know what you're going to do. But yet within that seemingly very rigid environment, it's supportive of awakened experiences if you just give yourself over to it with low expectations. Just come and sit. That's all. Don't come to have awakening. Don't come to crack your koan if you're working on a koan. Just come and put your full effort into sitting, into being present with whatever it is that's arising. If it's a koan, then be present with that. Or your breath, or counting, or as has been said, whatever it is, just put your whole energy into that, but with low expectations.
I love T.S. Eliot's "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all exploring will be to arrive where we started and
Yeah.
place for the first time."
Yes,
It's
that's beautiful.
just so profound.
It is. Yeah, thanks for reminding us. Yeah. Well, if there's nothing else, I'm going to emulate Susan, who brought us in right on schedule. I'm showing 4:49, so by the time we finish chanting, we're right on track. May our intention equally penetrate every being and place with the true merit of Buddha's way. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it. All right, so we'll have a 10-minute break. And I'll let you end this, Joan. I don't know. Where do I? Oh, stop recording. Done. Okay. I think there's